that leg! What a bum on the government!
He must have fallen in the kitchen. It wasn't a war.
I lost this leg in Fallujah, saving 7...
A disabled Marine walked by. Minutes later, Hell's Angels made them regret it. When construction workers mocked disabled Marine veteran Sarah Miller's prosthetic leg, they thought their cruelty was private until Steel Morrison recognized the woman who'd saved his life in Fallujah and called 12 Hell's Angels for immediate backup. Day 1, 2:15 p.m. Downtown Houston's construction site buzzed with lunch break energy as workers gathered near the chain-link fence. Sarah Miller, 31, walked past on her way to physical therapy, her prosthetic right leg moving with practiced efficiency despite the Texas heat. The IED in Fallujah had taken her leg but not her Spirit 3 tours. Purple Heart, Bronze Star for valor under fire, she just wanted to walk in peace. Sarah had lost her leg, making 3 runs under enemy fire to rescue wounded Marines during the Second Battle of Fallujah. 17 soldiers owed their lives to her courage, but civilians only saw disability requiring pity rather than sacrifice deserving honor. Physical therapy twice weekly helped manage phantom limb pain that military medicine couldn't eliminate through standard treatment. Walking past construction sites had become routine until today, when lunch break turned ugly. Foreman Frank Harris, 43, watched Sarah approach with contempt that civilian comfort had bred toward military sacrifice he'd never understood. 20 years in construction had taught him that weakness meant liability, and disabled people represented everything he despised about government handouts. "Look at Gimpy over there," Harris announced loudly enough for Sarah to hear. "Your tax dollars at work, probably getting disability checks for stubbing her toe." Steel Morrison, 45, sat in his Harley outside Murphy's diner when cruel laughter caught his attention. Vietnam veteran whose own PTSD had been saved by younger Marines' courage during joint operations in Iraq, that civilian memory had forgotten. He recognized Sarah immediately, the Marine who'd carried him to safety after shrapnel had left him unconscious and bleeding. The woman whose sacrifice had enabled his survival and civilian motorcycle club leadership that protected vulnerable veterans. Some debts can never be repaid, but they can be honored when brothers see family attacked by those who've never served anything greater than themselves. Harris's mockery grew louder as Sarah approached, his construction crew joining laughter that military sacrifice didn't deserve from civilians whose freedom had been purchased through blood they'd never shed for others' security and prosperity. Viral setup, Sarah's nephew Jake Morrison would receive Steele's emergency call in exactly 4 minutes of family connection that would unleash Iron Brotherhood, Fury 2:17 p.m., 3 minutes to impact. "Hey, peg leg, did you lose that in a kitchen accident?" Harris shouted while his crew erupted in laughter that Sarah's military service didn't deserve from civilians whose security she'd protected through personal sacrifice. Sarah kept walking, ignoring taunts that civilian cruelty had perfected against veterans whose visible wounds reminded comfortable citizens about war's cost that others had paid for their peaceful existence. "What's wrong? Can't run away fast enough?" another worker called while pointing at prosthetic that represented courage rather than comedy to anyone understanding military sacrifice. Sarah's training kicked in Marine discipline that IED explosion couldn't eliminate, despite physical damage that required daily management through strength that civilians rarely possessed during similar challenges. "Bet she got that fake leg from falling down drunk on her disability checks," Harris continued, while ignorance masqueraded as humor that revealed character beneath civilian comfort that military protection had enabled. Steele's hands tightened on handlebars as recognition flooded memory. Sarah Miller, Corporal, USMC the Marine, who'd saved 17 lives, including his own, when mortar attack had left him bleeding in Fallujah Street. This was the woman who'd made 3 trips under enemy fire to drag wounded soldiers to safety. The hero whose courage had enabled his survival and return to family, that her sacrifice had protected from grief. Shareable moment. Nearby pedestrian starts recording mockery of disabled veteran would be online in 34 seconds. 2:18 p.m. 2 minutes to thunder, Steele's phone buzzed with speed dial to Jake Morrison, Sarah's nephew and Iron Brotherhood member, whose emergency response system connected military families requiring immediate protection from civilian abuse. Jake, your Aunt Sarah's being attacked by construction workers at 5th and Main. Verbal assault on disabled Marine. Need immediate backup. Steele, that's my hero aunt, saved 17 Marines in Fallujah. I'm 5 minutes out with brothers. The response activated veteran network throughout Houston, whose combined military experience included 40 years of combat service that civilian mockery had just provoked through institutional failure. Meanwhile, Harris escalated cruelty, while Sarah maintained dignity that military training had developed through situations requiring grace under pressure that civilian comfort couldn't understand. Probably collecting checks for PTSD too, crying about nightmares while real Americans work for living, Harris announced, while revealing character that construction site authority had enabled through unchallenged bigotry. Sarah stopped walking, turned around. Marine discipline demanded response that civilian ignorance had provoked through mockery of service that Harris's freedom depended upon despite his ingratitude. I lost this leg-saving soldiers whose families will never have to grieve because I chose courage over safety. What have you sacrificed for anyone besides yourself? The question hung in Texas heat, while Harris faced accountability for civilian comfort that military sacrifice had purchased through blood he'd never shed for others' welfare. 2:19 p.m., 1 minute to reckoning. Harris's response revealed character that civilian privilege had corrupted. Lady, I work for living instead of collecting government handouts for missing body parts. Maybe try getting real job. The insult crossed lines that military service had drawn permanently through sacrifice that civilian mockery couldn't diminish despite Harris's ignorance about veteran employment challenges. Sarah's composure cracked slightly, not from anger, but from grief that civilian society treated military sacrifice as burden rather than gift, that freedom required through service that few provided voluntarily. Sir, I served 3 tours protecting your right to build buildings in safety. This prosthetic represents courage you'll never understand because you never risked anything for strangers. Harris prepared another insult while surrounded by crew whose laughter encouraged continued cruelty that military honor couldn't tolerate from those whose security depended on others' sacrifice. But distinctive sound approached from distance, multiple Harley engines in formation that Steel Morrison's emergency call had activated through Iron Brotherhood response system, protecting vulnerable veterans from civilian abuse. Jake Morrison led convoy of 12 bikers, whose combined service included Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, and decades of civilian struggles with authorities who'd failed to honor military families requiring community protection. Time to educate some civilians about respecting Marines, Jake announced over radio, while understanding that family honor demanded immediate intervention against institutional mockery. Cliffhanger. 12 Harleys turned corner like rolling thunder, while construction site laughter died in throats that had never tasted combat fear. 2:20 p.m. Arrival of justice. 12 Hell's Angels materialized around construction site like leather-clad avenging spirits whose military bearing commanded immediate attention from civilian workers who'd never faced veterans defending family honor. Jake Morrison dismounted first, 6'1". Marine whose combat tours had taught him about protecting vulnerable family members from institutional failures requiring immediate brotherhood response. Afternoon, gentlemen. Understand you've been entertaining yourselves with my aunt's military service, Jake announced, while respectful tone carried authority that combat experience had earned through sacrifice. Harris attempted damage control. Just friendly conversation with local resident who, friendly conversation, Steel interrupted while dismounting. I heard every word from across street. Mocking disabled Marine who saved 17 lives, including mine, isn't conversation, it's disgrace. The revelation stunned construction crew as understanding dawned that their mockery had targeted genuine war hero whose courage had enabled other veterans' survival and civilian leadership. Sarah Miller carried me to safety after mortar attack left me unconscious and bleeding in Fallujah Street. Your Gimpy is hero who earned that prosthetic through valor you'll never comprehend. Witnesses began recording confrontation, while social media documentation would transform local incident into national conversation about civilian treatment of disabled veterans requiring community protection. Harris's authority evaporated as 12 veterans formed protective circle around Sarah, while their combined military service represented century of sacrifice that construction site mockery had dishonored. 2:23 p.m. Social media eruption. Heroes deserve better exploded across platforms as witnesses shared video of construction workers mocking disabled Marine veteran whose military service had protected civilian freedom that mockery had violated. Construction crew just attacked disabled Marine war hero. Air Sarah Miller, USMC, saved 17 lives in Fallujah. Twitter caption generated instant outrage, while visual evidence contradicted any claim of innocent conversation. Harris's construction company received flood of calls from viewers demanding accountability for employees whose mockery had targeted decorated veteran requiring protection rather than persecution. Steel's coordination with veteran networks activated response from military families throughout Texas, whose social media reach amplified Sarah's story beyond local incident into regional crisis. That's Sarah Miller Bronze Star recipient, whose courage saved my son during Fallujah deployment, testified Gold Star mother, whose post reached 50,000 shares within minutes. Harris realized crisis severity as company reputation crumbled through real-time documentation that professional conduct couldn't overcome through damage control. Jake's live stream reached Iron Brotherhood chapters nationwide, while motorcycle communities combined social media influence created viral support for disabled veteran whose sacrifice had earned protection rather than mockery. Construction workers attacking disabled Marine, Jake announced during broadcast. Same Marine who saved Steele's life and 17 others in Iraq. This is family business now. 2:30 p.m. Corporate response. Harris's supervisor arrived after receiving frantic calls from headquarters, whose social media monitoring had detected crisis requiring immediate damage control that local management had created through employee misconduct. Harris, what the hell is happening here? Regional Manager Patricia Chen demanded, while understanding that viral video had created liability nightmare-threatening company contracts. Jake provided alternative narrative. Your foreman and crew spent lunch break mocking disabled Marine veteran whose prosthetic leg they found amusing entertainment. Chen studied video evidence while recognizing that construction industry reputation had been damaged through documented discrimination against decorated veteran whose military service deserved respect rather than ridicule. Mr. Harris, you're terminated effective immediately. Company policy prohibits discrimination against disabled individuals, especially veterans, whose service protects our freedom to operate businesses. Harris's firing was live-streamed to 47,000 viewers, while justice served in real time demonstrated corporate accountability for employee misconduct that military families wouldn't tolerate through community silence. Steele's testimony provided context about Sarah's heroism. This Marine made 3 runs under enemy fire to save wounded soldiers, lost her leg on final rescue when IED exploded nearby. 17 families have loved ones because of her courage. The revelation transformed mockery into shame as construction crew processed understanding that their entertainment had targeted genuine American hero, whose sacrifice had enabled their civilian comfort. Day 2, Sunday morning, Sarah woke to discover overnight transformation into viral sensation, while your Sarah Miller hero generated 2 million posts documenting her Fallujah heroism that construction site mockery had inadvertently publicized. I never wanted attention, Sarah told Jake during a hospital visit where prosthetic adjustment required professional maintenance. Just wanted to walk without harassment. But Steele's advocacy had activated veteran community response, while Iron Brotherhood coordinated with disability organizations whose expertise would ensure maximum accountability for discrimination. Harris faced federal investigation as Equal Employment Opportunity Commission reviewed workplace harassment that Sarah's case had revealed as systematic problem affecting disabled veterans seeking civilian employment. Sunday, 2 p.m., national recognition, CNN called, Fox News called. Every major network wanted interviews with decorated Marine whose construction site harassment had revealed civilian ignorance about veteran sacrifice requiring ongoing education. But call that mattered came from unexpected source, President of United States. Corporal Miller, your service and sacrifice deserve better treatment than you received. Changes will be made to ensure no veteran faces such ignorance again. Emotional moment number 1. Presidential recognition of Sarah's heroism while she sits in hospital adjusting prosthetic, powerful juxtaposition of sacrifice and respect. Day 3, Monday morning. Sarah's story had attracted unwanted attention from disability fraud investigators whose scrutiny of viral veteran required verification that social media claims couldn't automatically validate through documentation review. Ms. Miller, federal investigation requires confirmation of disability claims and military service records. Investigator announced, while bureaucratic processes threatened privacy that media attention had inadvertently compromised. Steel coordinated legal response, while Iron Brotherhood provided security for Sarah, whose sudden fame had created safety concerns that public attention often generated for vulnerable individuals. Sarah needs protection from internet trolls and government investigators, Steel told media, while understanding that heroism couldn't shield veterans from institutional failures that viral attention had activated. Harris's employment termination triggered wrongful dismissal lawsuit claiming discrimination against civilian whose comments had been taken out of context by veteran advocacy groups seeking publicity. My client engaged in workplace conversation that was mischaracterized by biased witnesses whose military connections influenced interpretation, Harris's attorney announced, while legal strategy ignored documented evidence. But real crisis developed when disability fraud allegations reached social media, where keyboard warriors questioned Sarah's heroism through anonymous attacks that veteran haters used to undermine military credibility. Fake hero, using disability for attention, trolls posted, while coordinated harassment campaign targeted Sarah's social media accounts with cruel messages that civilian cowardice had generated. Jake's Iron Brotherhood response was swift. Anyone attacking Sarah Miller attacks entire veteran community. We're monitoring every threat. Monday, 6 p.m. Vindication Department of Defense released Sarah's complete service record, while Medal of Honor Society provided testimony confirming her Fallujah heroism that construction site mockery had inadvertently celebrated through national attention. Corporal Sarah Miller's Bronze Star citation documents 3 rescue missions under enemy fire that saved 17 Marines during Second Battle of Fallujah, Pentagon spokesperson announced during press conference. Video footage from Fallujah showed Sarah's actual rescue missions, while helmet camera documentation contradicted fraud allegations that internet trolls had promoted through anonymous harassment. Every allegation against Sarah Miller has been disproven through military documentation, Defense Secretary announced, while federal support eliminated doubt about heroism that civilian mockery had questioned. Steele's testimony provided eyewitness account. Sarah saved my life during mortar attack, carried me 200 yards under enemy fire while IED explosions threatened her safety, lost her leg on final rescue mission. Harris's lawsuit collapsed as legal precedent required proving actual discrimination rather than accountability for documented harassment that construction site behavior had created through unprofessional conduct. Federal civil rights investigation found systematic harassment at construction site, while Harris's firing had been justified through documented misconduct that disability discrimination laws had addressed appropriately. Emotional moment number 2. Sarah watching Fallujah footage while thanking fallen Marines who didn't make it home, tissues required nationwide. Tuesday, day 4. Sarah's first public appearance at Veteran Rally drew 25,000 people, while Iron Brotherhood provided security for disabled Marine whose heroism had inspired national conversation about civilian treatment of military families. I didn't serve for recognition, served for brothers and sisters whose sacrifice enabled freedom that we all share, Sarah addressed crowd, while prosthetic legs stood testament to courage that construction mockery had celebrated inadvertently. Harris issued public apology. I was wrong about Corporal Miller. Ignorance doesn't excuse disrespecting hero whose service protected my freedom to work in safety. The statement went viral, while redemption is possible became secondary hashtag supporting accountability rather than permanent condemnation for civilian ignorance that education could address. Wednesday, Day 5, construction company implemented Sarah Miller Protocol, requiring sensitivity training for all employees, while federal contracts now mandated veteran appreciation education that discrimination had proven necessary. Steel's Iron Brotherhood received federal recognition as Veteran Advocacy Organization, while their response had demonstrated community protection for vulnerable military families facing civilian harassment. Sarah announced foundations supporting disabled veterans, while her platform would address systematic problems that individual mockery had revealed through viral attention requiring sustained advocacy. 1 month later, Sarah's Quiet Heroes Foundation had raised $2.3 million for disabled veteran support, while her story had inspired systematic changes protecting military families from civilian discrimination requiring ongoing education. Steel served as Foundation Security Coordinator, while Iron Brotherhood had evolved into recognized veteran advocacy organization whose leather jackets couldn't hide hearts dedicated to protecting vulnerable brothers and sisters. Harris completed mandatory sensitivity training, while his transformation from ignorant civilian to veteran advocate had demonstrated possibility for change that accountability, rather than condemnation, could achieve through proper education. Congressional hearings resulted in national sensitivity training requirements, while Sarah's case had influenced policy protecting disabled veterans from workplace harassment that systematic ignorance had created. Jake's Iron Brotherhood chapter established veteran outreach programs in 12 cities, while their advocacy had created sustainable support networks serving military families requiring community protection from institutional failures. Federal legislation provided funding for veteran sensitivity training, while Sarah Miller Protocol became standard procedure at government contractors requiring disability awareness that harassment had proven essential. 6 months later, National Disabled Veterans Conference invited Sarah as keynote speaker, while her transformation from harassment victim to policy advocate had influenced systematic change protecting military families nationwide. Harris's mockery revealed how civilian ignorance becomes institutional discrimination when unchecked by proper education and accountability. Sarah addressed 5,000+ veterans whose service had earned protection rather than persecution. Steel's Iron Brotherhood had established disability advocacy chapters in 25 states, while their support created sustainable programs serving vulnerable veterans that official systems couldn't adequately protect. Harris's community service included work with disabled veterans, while his rehabilitation had demonstrated genuine commitment to change that education and accountability had enabled through personal transformation. Academic research studied Sarah's case while documenting how individual incidents could inspire systematic reform when community organizing met institutional willingness to address discrimination requiring comprehensive intervention. Military families sacrifice for freedom that includes right to live without harassment from those whose security depends on others' service, Sarah testified before Congress. Opposition from construction industry claimed sensitivity training created operational burdens, while some companies resisted requirements that disability advocates demanded for federal contract compliance. Additional protocols burden workers with unnecessary complexity during project completion. Industry representative argued while ignoring evidence that proper training reduced rather than increased workplace conflicts. Sarah's advocacy overcame resistance through documented results showing improved employee relations and reduced liability costs. At companies implementing comprehensive sensitivity training that veteran awareness had provided. Steele's testimony supported legislative requirements. Military families earned respect through service that civilian comfort takes for granted during daily activities requiring accommodation rather than discrimination. Federal legislation faced opposition, while some lawmakers claimed reform would burden contractors despite evidence showing improved outcomes at companies implementing veteran appreciation policies. Grassroots organizing provided constituent pressure, while military families contacted representatives whose votes were needed for comprehensive protection from workplace harassment. Congressional passage of Sarah Miller, Veterans Protection Act, required all federal contractors to implement disability sensitivity training, while penalties increased for harassment of military families. This law ensures disabled veterans receive respect their service has earned rather than mockery their sacrifice doesn't deserve, President announced while signing ceremony honored Sarah's advocacy achievement. Supreme Court citation of Sarah's case in disability rights ruling established permanent precedent protecting veterans from workplace harassment that civilian ignorance couldn't excuse through training failures. Military service creates presumption of respect that civilian employers must honor through professional conduct. Unanimous court decision declared while Sarah's harassment had provided foundation for constitutional interpretation. Sarah's foundation influenced training at 1,000-plus companies, while her experience had become standard curriculum for contractor education about veteran appreciation requiring professional competence. International attention focused on American veteran rights, while Sarah's advocacy had inspired similar movements in countries addressing military family discrimination that global awareness was addressing. 1 year later, Sarah's return to construction site marked transformation from harassment location to memorial honoring disabled veterans whose service had protected civilian freedom that appreciation rather than mockery should acknowledge. Harris personally apologized while site displayed permanent plaque, "In honor of all who sacrifice for freedom, may their service inspire respect rather than ignorance." Steel's Iron Brotherhood escorted Sarah to ceremony, while their advocacy had earned recognition that motorcycle club reputation hadn't previously generated through service to vulnerable populations. Jake's continuing veteran advocacy had influenced other military families, while Sarah's courage had inspired systematic change protecting disabled service members from civilian discrimination. Sarah's prosthetic represented courage rather than disability, while her foundation had demonstrated that individual harassment could inspire collective change protecting military families from institutional failures. Some battles are fought overseas, others on city sidewalks, but most important ones protect veterans from those who would mock sacrifice rather than honor service, Sarah reflected. Federal oversight ensured continued compliance, while systematic monitoring addressed problems that individual harassment had revealed as requiring comprehensive intervention rather than isolated accountability alone. The Sarah Miller Quiet Heroes Foundation had influenced training at 2,000-plus companies, while federal legislation required veteran sensitivity education that her harassment had demonstrated as essential for military family protection. Harris's transformation from antagonist to advocate had demonstrated rehabilitation requiring genuine change rather than superficial compliance. Steel's Iron Brotherhood had coordinated $500,000 in disabled veteran assistance, while their advocacy had earned recognition that motorcycle reputation hadn't previously generated. Sarah's independence had been restored through community support, while her foundation had transformed personal harassment into systematic change, protecting military families. Construction industry showed 60% improvement in veteran relations, while training had reduced discrimination incidents through education. Federal oversight ensured sustained compliance, while veteran rights had gained permanent protection through policy changes that individual mockery had inspired through viral attention requiring ongoing enforcement against civilian ignorance that training could overcome. 3 years later, Sarah Miller served on National Veterans Affairs Advisory Committee, while Harris's harassment had influenced federal policy protecting disabled military families from workplace discrimination that education could prevent through proper training. Steel's Iron Brotherhood operated in 40 states, while their advocacy had created sustainable support networks for veterans facing civilian harassment requiring community assistance. Harris's continuing service to disabled veterans had demonstrated genuine transformation, while his rehabilitation had influenced training programs nationwide. They learned that some battles are fought with weapons, others with prosthetics, but the most important ones are fought when choosing respect over ridicule transforms individual harassment into systematic change. Protecting military families from those who would mock sacrifice rather than honor service that freedom requires through ongoing vigilance against civilian ignorance that threatens veteran dignity, earned through blood and courage that comfortable society often takes for granted without understanding true cost of liberty. Some battles are fought with weapons, others with prosthetics, but the most important ones are fought when choosing respect over ridicule transforms individual harassment into systematic change, protecting those who've already sacrificed everything for the freedom to live with dignity.